Here's some XRP math to prove to you why market cap does not matter when it comes to XRP price. Let's go. Let's start off by saying real liquidity is not always 100% available. It's usually 1 to 5% available. Imagine every 3 to 5 seconds, one XRP has to provide billions of dollars worth of liquidity. And it's not always there at that exact moment for these reasons. Pause to read. So in my XRP math, I'm going to be using a 100x multiplier, which represents slippage, risk buffers, all these things that you can pause to read. So here's the first example, and I'll be using the same numbers in the rest of the examples. The velocity is how many times one XRP can be used each day. So 21,600 is one XRP being used every 4 seconds for 24 hours. We're also going to use $100 trillion as daily inflows and a $5 billion float, which is the actual amount of XRP needed to settle all these transactions. 100 trillion divided by 21,600 means each XRP has to handle 4.63 billion in liquidity. And when you divide that by the float to 5 billion, you get a 92-cent XRP times our multiplier of 100. That is $92.60 per XRP. Even a 50x multiplier, you're looking at $45 XRP. In this example, one XRP is being used 10,000 times per day. When you divide 100 trillion by 10,000, that means each XRP has to have $10 billion in liquidity on its own. Then you take the 10 billion divided by our $5 billion float, which is the actual amount of XRP needed to do our transactions. We get a $2 XRP. And when you times that by our 100x multiplier, you get an XRP price of $200. Third example, each XRP being used 1,000 times per day. 100 trillion in inflows divided by that 1,000 gets you each XRP has to provide liquidity for $100 billion each. Now we take that 100 billion divided by our $5 billion float, which again is the actual amount of XRP being used, not the total circulation supply. That gets us a $20 per XRP minimum. Now we times that by our 100x multiplier, and our XRP price is $2,000. Even if it was a 50x multiplier, that's $1,000. Here's our fourth example out of the 5, velocity of 100, which means one XRP is being used 100 times per day. Now you take the 100 trillion divided by the 100, that means each XRP has to provide liquidity for $1 trillion. You take that $1 trillion divided by our $5 billion float, which is the actual amount of XRP that are needed to support all these transactions. You're going to get a $200 XRP. Now you times that by our 100x multiplier for some slippage and all those reasons you're supposed to read at the beginning, and your final price of this XRP would be a huge 20,000 bucks. Even at a 50x multiplier, we're at 10,000, and even at a 10x multiplier, we're still sitting at a $2,000 XRP. Our final example, velocity of 10, meaning each XRP is being used 10 times. You have 100 trillion inflows, divide that by 10. That means each XRP has to provide liquidity for $10 trillion each. Now you take that 10 trillion, divide by our $5 billion of float, which is the actual amount of XRP needed for these transactions. Our price of XRP is 2,000 bucks. Now we add in our 100x multiplier, and we get a grand total, $200,000 per XRP. Now feel free to punch in your own numbers, your own inflows. I was using 100 trillion and a $5 billion float, but feel free to put in your own numbers and see what you come up with. But the key to XRP price is velocity. That is the number one key to an XRP price. And this, folks, is why market cap does not matter. That's old school thinking. This is not a stock. This is a utility. Do they put a market cap on oil? Do they put a market cap on gold?